First pattern, the mind contact synchronicity. You're sitting quietly, going about your day, when suddenly someone pops into your mind. Not just a fleeting thought, but a vivid, almost intrusive presence. You haven't thought about this person in weeks, maybe months. There's no obvious trigger, no logical reason why they should appear in your consciousness right now. Then within minutes, sometimes within seconds, your phone buzzes. It's them, a text message, a phone call, or you run into them at a completely unexpected place. Your heart skips. The hair on your arm stands up. This can't be coincidence. It feels too precise, too impossible. You've just experienced the first and most common synchronicity pattern that humans report, the thinking of someone pattern. This is where our journey into synchronicity begins, because if you've experienced this even once, you know exactly how it feels. And that feeling demands an explanation. This pattern appears so frequently in human experience that it's become almost universal. People from every culture, every background, every belief system report the same phenomenon. The timing feels impossibly perfect. The specificity is unsettling. You weren't thinking about people in general. You were thinking about this exact person. And they weren't contacting you at some vague later time. They reached out right now, in this precise moment when their image filled your mind. The power of this synchronicity lies in its emotional impact. When it happens, something inside you shifts. For a moment, the solid, predictable world becomes mysterious. The boundaries between minds seem thinner than you thought. The separation between people feels less absolute. It's as if consciousness itself can reach across space, as if thoughts themselves can touch each other across the invisible distances between human beings. But let's look deeper. What's actually happening here? Is this evidence of telepathy, of minds communicating directly without words or technology? Or is something else at play, something equally fascinating but rooted in how our brains construct reality? First, consider how memory works. Your mind stores thousands of connections with other people, former friends, current colleagues, distant relatives, brief acquaintances. Each one exists as a complex network of memories, emotions, and associations. Throughout any given day, your brain continuously processes information, making connections you're not consciously aware of. A smell, a word, a color, a sound. Any of these can trigger a cascade of associations that brings someone to mind. Now here's the crucial part. People think about each other far more often than we realize. If you have 50 people in your life who occasionally think about you, and each one thinks about you once a week, that's roughly 7 thought moments per day where someone has you in their mind. Similarly, you're probably thinking about various people dozens of times throughout your day, even in passing, barely conscious ways. When you add in communication patterns, the picture becomes even more interesting. Most people have rhythms to their social behavior. Certain people tend to reach out on certain days. Certain relationships have natural communication cycles. Someone who texts you every 2 weeks will likely text you again around that 2-week mark. Your subconscious mind tracks these patterns even when you're not consciously aware of them. So what happens is this: your brain, processing information beneath conscious awareness, recognizes that it's been a while since you heard from someone. It notices patterns that suggest they might reach out soon. This creates a subtle activation of that person in your memory network. Suddenly they pop into your conscious mind. You think you're having a random thought, but your brain has actually made a sophisticated prediction based on accumulated data. Then, when that person does contact you, the timing feels magical. But here's the thing. You've probably thought about dozens of other people that day who didn't contact you. Those moments created no synchronicity, so your brain doesn't flag them as significant. They disappear without a trace. But the one hit, the one match between thought and contact, blazes in your memory like a supernova. This is called confirmation bias, and it's incredibly powerful. Your brain is designed to notice patterns and connections. When something confirms a pattern, it gets stamped with significance. When something doesn't fit the pattern, it gets filtered out as noise. You remember the hits and forget the misses. creating the illusion of a much stronger phenomenon than actually exists. There's also the reticular activating system at work, a part of your brain that decides what information deserves your conscious attention. When you think about someone, you're priming your attention system to notice anything related to that person. So if they do contact you within the next hour, day, or even week, your brain flags it as connected to your earlier thought, even if the two events are actually unrelated. But here's what makes this pattern so compelling. Even understanding all the psychological mechanisms doesn't completely strip away the mystery. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the timing is too perfect, too precise, too impossible to explain away completely. And in those moments, we're left wondering whether consciousness is truly as isolated as we assume, or whether something deeper connects us all. Second pattern, the numerical mirror synchronicity. You glance at your phone to check the time. It's 11:11. You smile at the coincidence and go back to what you were doing. An hour later, you're at a store, and your receipt total comes to 22.22. Walking to your car, you notice the license plate in front of you, 333. By the time you get home and see 4:44 on your clock, something has shifted inside you. This isn't random anymore. The universe seems to be speaking to you in the language of numbers. Welcome to the second pattern, the number repetition synchronicity. This is perhaps the most persistent and pervasive of all synchronicity patterns. Once it begins, it can continue for days, weeks, months, or even years. Numbers become symbols, and symbols become messages. You start to feel like you're living inside a code that's trying to tell you something important. Unlike the first pattern, which requires another person, this pattern operates entirely between you and your environment. The numbers appear on clocks, receipts, street addresses, page numbers, timestamps, odometers, and anywhere else digits can be displayed. What makes this pattern so haunting is its relentlessness. It doesn't happen once and disappear. It repeats, creating a rhythm that feels intentional, designed, meaningful. The most commonly reported sequences are the mirror numbers, digits that repeat themselves. 1111 is the king of this pattern, so prevalent that it's become a cultural phenomenon. People post about it on social media, tattoo it on their bodies, and attribute mystical significance to it. Then come 222, 333, 444, and 555. Each one arrives with that same uncanny feeling that the universe just winked at you. Some people experience sequential numbers instead, 123, 234, or counting patterns that appear too frequently to ignore. Others find themselves haunted by one specific number that follows them everywhere. It might be a birth date, an anniversary, or a seemingly random number that has chosen them for reasons they can't comprehend. The emotional response to this pattern is fascinating. Unlike other synchronicities that might make you feel connected to another person or guided toward an answer, number repetition creates a sense of being watched. Not in a frightening way, but in a way that suggests something is paying attention to you. Something knows you're noticing. Something is confirming that yes, you're seeing what you think you're seeing. Cultural interpretations have sprung up around these numbers. Angel numbers, they're called in spiritual circles. Each sequence supposedly carries a specific message from guardian angels or the universe itself. 211 means new beginnings. 222 means balance and harmony. 333 means divine protection. 444 means angels are near. These interpretations give people a framework for understanding their experiences, transforming random digits into a cosmic conversation. But let's examine the mechanics behind this pattern. Your brain is an extraordinary pattern recognition machine. It evolved to find patterns because patterns meant survival. The rustle of leaves in a specific rhythm meant a predator. The arrangement of stars meant navigation. The repetition of behaviors meant predictability. Your ancestors, who were best at finding patterns, were the ones who survived to pass on their genes. In the modern world, you're surrounded by numbers constantly. Every digital device displays time. Every transaction generates numerical totals. Every street has an address. Every vehicle has a plate. You're swimming in an ocean of digits, encountering thousands of number combinations every single day. Most of them pass through your awareness without leaving any impression whatsoever. But here's where it gets interesting. The moment you notice 1111 once and think about it, something activates in your brain. Your reticular activating system, the same mechanism from our first pattern, suddenly tags repeated digits as significant. Now, instead of filtering them out as meaningless background noise, your brain highlights them. It's like buying a particular car and suddenly seeing that same model everywhere. The cars were always there, but now your brain has been programmed to notice them. There's also a mathematical element at play. Mirror numbers like 1111 are visually distinctive. They create symmetry, which the human brain finds inherently satisfying and memorable. You're far more likely to glance at your clock when it shows 1111 than when it shows 1047. Not because of any mystical timing, but because 1111 catches your eye and holds it. Asymmetrical numbers simply don't register with the same impact. Consider also how often you check the time. If you look at a clock 20 times a day, that's 7,300 time checks per year. With 12 possible mirror number times in each 12-hour cycle, the probability of hitting them is actually quite high. But you don't remember the 2,473 times you checked and saw 837 or 216. You remember the 15 times you saw 555. Yet even armed with this understanding, the pattern persists in feeling meaningful. Because there's something else happening too. A feedback loop between observation and occurrence. The more you notice the numbers, the more you look for them. The more you look for them, the more you find them. And the more you find them, the more convinced you become that something real is happening. Some researchers suggest that during certain psychological states, stress, transition, seeking, questioning, our pattern recognition systems go into overdrive. We become hypervigilant for signs and signals that might guide us. Numbers, being everywhere and quantifiable, become the perfect canvas for this search for meaning. This is the second pattern, the numerical mirror that reflects back our need to find order, meaning, and perhaps even magic in the mathematical language that structures our reality. Third pattern, the question-response synchronicity. You've been wrestling with a decision for days. Should you take the new job? Should you end the relationship? Should you move to a different city? The question circles endlessly in your mind, creating anxiety, confusion, and paralysis. You can't see a clear path forward. Then, while sitting in a cafe, completely lost in your thoughts, you overhear two strangers at the next table. They're discussing the exact dilemma you're facing, and one of them says something that cuts through all your confusion like a blade through fog. In that moment, you have your answer. This is the third pattern. The answer appears: synchronicity. It's the phenomenon where the universe seems to respond directly to your internal questions through external events. Unlike the first two patterns, which involve connections between minds or recognition of numbers, this pattern feels like a dialogue between you and reality itself. You ask, and somehow, impossibly, reality answers. The power of this pattern lies in its specificity. You're not wondering about vague philosophical questions. You're dealing with concrete, personal dilemmas that feel unique to your situation. And yet the answer doesn't come from your own contemplation. It arrives from outside, delivered through channels that seem to have no knowledge of your internal struggle. A random conversation, a book that falls off a shelf and opens to a particular page. A song on the radio with lyrics that speak directly to your situation. A billboard you pass on the highway with a message that feels written specifically for you. What makes this pattern so emotionally powerful is the sense of being seen. In a vast, indifferent universe where you're just one consciousness among billions, these moments create the feeling that something is paying attention to you specifically. Something knows what you're struggling with. Something cares enough to send you guidance. The loneliness of the human experience temporarily dissolves in the face of what feels like cosmic communication. people report this pattern occurring through multiple channels simultaneously. You might be wondering whether to pursue a particular path, and within a single day, 3 different sources, a podcast, a conversation, and an article, all address your exact question from different angles. The repetition feels impossibly targeted. The odds seem astronomical. How could 3 unrelated sources conspire to deliver the same message unless something was orchestrating the synchronicity? The timing is what seals the deal. These answers don't appear weeks later when the question has faded. They appear in the heat of your struggle, sometimes within hours of when you've been most intensely focused on the question. You've been agonizing all morning, and by afternoon the answer arrives. The immediacy creates a cause and effect feeling that's difficult to shake, even when you try to think rationally about it. Let's examine what's actually happening beneath the surface. When you're deeply engaged with a question, your mind enters a specific state. You're not just casually curious, you're actively searching. Every part of your cognitive system becomes oriented toward that question. Your attention sharpens. Your memory systems start pulling up related information. Your pattern recognition abilities go into high alert. This is called priming, and it's one of the most powerful effects in psychology. When your mind is primed with a question, you become extraordinarily sensitive to anything related to that question. Information that would normally pass through your awareness unnoticed suddenly lights up like a beacon. You're not actually receiving more relevant information than usual. You're noticing more of the relevant information that's always been present. Think about how much information flows past you every day. Conversations happening around you, songs playing in stores and cars, signs and advertisements lining every street, articles and posts flooding your digital feeds, books sitting on shelves, media playing on screens. It's an overwhelming torrent of words, images, ideas, and messages. Your brain filters out the vast majority because it has to. You'd be paralyzed by information overload otherwise. But when you're focused on a specific question, your filtering changes. Your reticular activating system, which normally suppresses irrelevant information, suddenly allows question-related content to break through. That conversation at the next table was probably covering a dozen different topics, but the one sentence that addressed your dilemma is the only one you consciously registered. The book that fell open to a relevant page was actually open to 2 pages containing thousands of words. But your eyes landed on the one paragraph that seemed to speak to you. There's also something called the frequency illusion working here. Once you've noticed one answer-like event, you become even more attuned to finding others. If you hear a relevant song on Monday, you're now primed to notice relevant conversations on Tuesday and relevant articles on Wednesday. Each instance reinforces your belief in the pattern, which increases your sensitivity to finding more instances. Human psychology has another fascinating feature. We're meaning-making machines. When we're struggling with questions, we desperately want guidance. This creates what psychologists call motivated perception. We unconsciously look for information that helps us, and we interpret ambiguous information in ways that provide that help. A song lyric that's actually about something completely different gets reinterpreted through the lens of your question. A generic piece of advice gets transformed into a specific answer to your specific situation. But here's the beautiful paradox at the heart of this pattern. Even if it's entirely psychological, it still works. Whether the universe is actually responding to your questions or your brain is simply becoming receptive to answers that were always present doesn't change the functional outcome. You were stuck and now you're unstuck. You were confused, and now you have clarity. The mechanism might be internal rather than external, but the transformation is real. This is the third pattern, the question-response synchronicity that makes us feel heard, guided, and connected to something larger than ourselves. Whether that something is cosmic intelligence or the magnificent pattern-finding power of our own consciousness. Fourth pattern. The recurring symbol, synchronicity. A bird appears outside your window, Nothing unusual about that. Birds are everywhere. But this isn't just any bird. It's a specific type, one you rarely see. You notice it, appreciate the moment, and move on with your day. Then driving to work, another one crosses your path. At lunch, a colleague mentions that exact bird species in conversation. That evening, scrolling through your feed, an image of that same bird appears. By the end of the week, you've encountered this bird or references to it 7 times. You're no longer dealing with coincidence. You're being followed by a symbol. This is the 4th pattern, the recurring symbol synchronicity. Unlike numbers which are abstract and unlike answers which are contextual, symbols are concrete. They're physical objects, specific animals, particular images, or distinctive words that appear repeatedly in your environment over a compressed period of time. The repetition creates the unmistakable feeling that something is trying to communicate with you through the language of symbols. The range of symbols people report is extraordinary. Feathers appearing in impossible places, on a high-rise balcony, with no birds around, inside a closed car, on a desk in a sealed office building. Coins showing up repeatedly, always the same denomination, always in unexpected locations. Specific animals crossing paths multiple times. Butterflies, deer, hawks, owls, creatures that don't normally appear with such frequency. Words or phrases that suddenly seem to be everywhere, jumping out from books, signs, conversations, and screens. What distinguishes this pattern from simple pattern recognition is the specificity and clustering. You're not noticing all birds, you're noticing one particular species. You're not finding all coins, you're finding only pennies or only dimes. The symbol is precise, and its appearances are concentrated in time. This isn't a vague sense of seeing something occasionally. It's an intense burst of encounters that feels targeted and intentional. The emotional impact of this pattern is profound. Symbols carry weight. Throughout human history, we've used symbols to represent ideas, emotions, and spiritual concepts that transcend language. A feather represents messages from the departed. A butterfly represents transformation. An owl represents wisdom. A crossroads represents decision. When these symbols appear repeatedly, especially during significant life moments, they feel like messages from something beyond ordinary reality. Cultural and spiritual traditions have fed this pattern for millennia. Almost every culture has a symbolic language that interprets animal appearances, natural phenomena, and recurring objects as omens or messages. If you've been raised in or exposed to these traditions, seeing a hawk repeatedly might immediately connect to concepts of vision and perspective. Finding feathers might connect to angelic presence or ancestral communication. The symbol arrives preloaded with meaning, waiting to be interpreted. But let's explore the mechanics of how this pattern actually operates. Your environment is filled with countless objects, animals, and images at any given moment. On a single walk through a neighborhood, you might pass hundreds of different visual elements: trees, flowers, insects, birds, cars, signs, buildings, people, pets. Your brain processes all of this, but most of it never reaches conscious awareness. It gets filtered out as irrelevant background information. Now imagine something happens that brings a particular symbol into your conscious focus. Maybe you have a meaningful dream about a specific animal. Maybe someone gives you an object with a distinctive image on it. Maybe you read something that mentions a particular symbol. At that moment, your brain tags that symbol as significant. Your reticular activating system, that tireless attention filter, suddenly puts that symbol on the priority list. From that point forward, every time that symbol appears in your environment, your brain flags it. It breaks through the filter. It reaches conscious awareness. But here's the crucial insight. The symbol was probably appearing at the same frequency all along. Birds of that species were always flying through your neighborhood. Coins were always scattered in parking lots. References to that concept were always present in your media consumption. The difference is that now you're noticing them. This is called selective attention, and it's incredibly powerful. Once your brain is primed to look for something, it finds it everywhere. The classic example is buying a car and suddenly seeing that model all over the road. The cars didn't multiply. Your attention to them did. The same mechanism drives symbol synchronicity. The universe isn't sending you more feathers. You're noticing more of the feathers that were always present. There's also a clustering effect based on how memory works. When you notice a symbol once, you're more likely to remember noticing it again soon after. This creates a perceived compression of encounters. If you see a specific bird 3 times in 1 week and then not again for 2 months, you remember the week of 3 encounters as highly significant. You might forget or not notice the 3 encounters spread across 3 months because there's no narrative, no pattern, no meaning to attach to scattered appearances. Human psychology adds another layer. Confirmation bias with symbols works over time. When you're tracking a symbol, you notice every instance of it appearing, and every instance gets added to the count. But you don't count all the times you went through your day without seeing it. You don't track all the other potential symbols that could have appeared, but didn't. Your brain keeps a running tally of hits while completely ignoring the misses, creating a distorted picture of frequency. Yet symbols carry something that numbers and answers don't. They carry emotional resonance. When a butterfly lands on your hand during a moment of grief, the symbol transcends statistical probability. It touches something deeper in human consciousness, something that responds to beauty, metaphor, and meaning. Whether the butterfly appeared because of quantum mechanics, divine intervention, or simple probability, doesn't change the comfort or insight it provides. This is the 4th pattern, the recurring symbol synchronicity that speaks to us in the ancient language of images, animals, and objects, a language older than words, deeper than logic, and powerful enough to transform how we see the world around us. 5th pattern, the precognitive dream. Synchronicity. You wake up with fragments of a dream clinging to your consciousness. The details are vivid, unusually clear for a dream. You were in a specific place you've never visited, having a conversation with someone about a topic that seemed random and meaningless. You shake it off, get ready for your day, and the dream fades into the background noise of your mind. Then hours later, you find yourself in that exact place. The conversation you dreamed unfolds word for word. The person, the setting, the topic, everything matches. Your skin goes cold. You've just stepped from a dream into waking reality, and the boundary between them has shattered. This is the 5th pattern, the Prophetic-Dream synchronicity. Of all the patterns we've explored, this one cuts deepest into our understanding of time, consciousness, and reality itself. While the previous patterns dealt with spatial connections, thinking of people, noticing numbers, receiving answers, tracking symbols, this pattern deals with temporal impossibility. It suggests that your consciousness somehow accessed information about events that hadn't happened yet. It whispers that the future might not be as unknown as we assume. The experience of prophetic dreams comes in several forms. Sometimes they're literal and specific. You dream about a particular person you haven't thought about in years, and the next day you encounter them unexpectedly. Sometimes they're symbolic but recognizable. You dream about water flooding a room, and the next day your basement pipes burst. Sometimes they're emotional previews. You dream of anxiety in an unfamiliar setting, and days later you find yourself in that setting, experiencing that exact anxiety. What makes this pattern so unsettling is the impossibility of it. With previous patterns, you could construct explanations. Maybe you subconsciously noticed communication patterns. Maybe your attention system highlighted numbers you were already seeing. Maybe your primed mind found relevant answers. But how does your sleeping mind access information about events that genuinely haven't occurred yet? How does consciousness reach forward through time? The most disturbing prophetic dreams are the ones with impossible specificity. You dream about having a conversation with someone, and they use a phrase you've never heard them say before, a phrase so specific and unusual that its appearance in waking reality becomes undeniable. You dream about being in a building you've never visited, noticing particular details like the color of a door or the pattern on a floor. And days later, you enter that building for the first time, and every detail matches. The precision eliminates comfortable explanations. Then there's the phenomenon of déjà vu, that eerie feeling of having experienced this exact moment before. Many people report that their déjà vu experiences aren't just vague familiarity, but specific connections to forgotten dreams. The moment feels familiar because you did experience it before, not in waking life, but in dream consciousness. Your sleeping mind somehow rehearsed this scene, and now you're living it. Let's examine what might actually be happening. The sleeping brain is extraordinary. During dreams, particularly during REM sleep, your brain becomes incredibly active. It processes memories, consolidates information, runs simulations, and makes connections that your waking mind wouldn't make. Your prefrontal cortex, the part that handles logic and reality testing, is relatively quiet, allowing associations to form without rational constraints. This means your dreaming mind can make predictions based on subtle patterns your conscious mind hasn't recognized. Think about all the information you absorb throughout your days, micro-expressions on people's faces, slight changes in their behavior, environmental cues you don't consciously register. Your brain processes all of this below awareness. During sleep, it might piece together patterns and project likely outcomes. When those outcomes occur, it feels prophetic, but it might actually be sophisticated unconscious prediction. There's also the sheer volume of dreams to consider. You dream multiple times every night. Most dreams you forget completely within minutes of waking. Even the dreams you remember upon waking usually fade within hours, unless you actively rehearse them. Over a year, you might generate thousands of dream scenarios. If even 1% of those dreams happen to match waking events through pure probability, you'll experience dozens of prophetic moments while forgetting the thousands of dreams that never manifested. Memory plays a crucial role here too. Human memory is not a video recording, it's a reconstruction. Every time you remember something, you rebuild it from fragments, and those fragments can be unconsciously altered. When something happens in waking life, your brain might search for similar experiences and accidentally merge a vague dream memory with the current experience, creating the false impression of exact prediction. You think you dreamed about this specific conversation, but actually you dreamed something similar, and your memory is filling in details retroactively. The déjà vu connection adds another layer. Neurologically, déjà vu might be a timing glitch in your brain's processing systems. Your brain processes experiences through multiple pathways, and usually these pathways sync perfectly. But occasionally, one pathway might fire slightly before the other, making the current moment feel like a memory. This creates the sensation of having experienced this before, and your mind searches for an explanation. "I must have dreamed this" becomes a convenient narrative that makes sense of the inexplicable feeling. Yet some prophetic dreams resist these explanations. Dreams about major events, disasters, deaths, significant encounters that occur with details no predictive processing could reasonably generate. Dreams that happen to multiple people independently about the same future event. Dreams where the dreamer has no possible access to the information that would allow even unconscious prediction. Here's where the pattern touches something deeper in human experience. Throughout history, across all cultures, humans have treated dreams as portals to knowledge beyond ordinary consciousness. Prophetic dreaming appears in ancient texts, religious traditions, and indigenous wisdom. Either humanity has been collectively deluded for thousands of years, or dreams access something our current scientific models don't fully explain. There's also the question of quantum consciousness. Some theories suggest that consciousness might not be entirely bound by linear time in the way we assume. If consciousness has any quantum properties, then the clear distinction between past, present, and future might be less absolute than it appears. Your dreaming mind, freed from the constraints of sensory reality, might occasionally slip sideways in time, accessing information from probability clouds that haven't collapsed into definite events yet. This is the fifth pattern, the prophetic dream synchronicity that makes us question whether time flows in only one direction. Whether consciousness is trapped in the present moment, or whether your sleeping mind sometimes wanders into tomorrow and brings back fragments of what's to come. Sixth pattern, the destined encounter synchronicity. You're running late. You missed your usual route. You took a wrong turn, ended up somewhere you had no intention of being, and you're frustrated by the detour. Then you walk into a place you've never been before, and there's someone there who changes everything. Maybe it's a future partner. Maybe it's someone who offers you an opportunity that redirects your entire career. Maybe it's a stranger who says something that shifts your perspective permanently. In that moment, every delay, every wrong turn, every seemingly random choice that led you there feels suddenly intentional. You weren't lost. You were being guided. This is the sixth pattern, the destined encounter synchronicity. Unlike the previous patterns which involved symbols, numbers, dreams, or answers arriving through impersonal channels, this pattern is entirely about human connection. It's about two people who had no reason to be in the same place at the same time, whose paths crossed through a series of unlikely events, and whose meeting feels orchestrated by forces beyond randomness. The emotional power of this pattern is immense because it touches the deepest human need: connection. We move through the world surrounded by billions of people, and most of them remain strangers forever. The fact that you meet anyone specific, form any particular relationship, or have any meaningful connection at all feels miraculous when you consider the odds. But this pattern goes beyond general appreciation for connection. It's about encounters that feel impossibly timed, as if the universe conspired to bring two people together. The stories follow familiar shapes. You almost didn't go to the event, but at the last minute you changed your mind, and that's where you met them. You were supposed to be somewhere else, but something fell through. So you ended up in this place instead, and there they were. You took a different route, sat in a different seat, arrived at a different time than usual, and that tiny deviation from routine put you in the exact position to encounter this person. The chain of unlikely events leading to the meeting feels too elaborate to be accidental. Sometimes the timing is measured in seconds. You walk through a door 30 seconds earlier or later than you might have, and that half-minute difference is the margin between meeting someone and never knowing they existed. You stay at a location 5 minutes longer than planned, and in that extra 5 minutes, someone arrives who becomes central to your life. The precision of the timing creates the overwhelming feeling that forces beyond your control were carefully orchestrating the encounter. Other times, the synchronicity is built on shared impossibilities. You're both traveling far from home, both in the same unlikely place at the same unlikely time. You both made series of unusual decisions that led to this intersection. The probability of either one of you being there was low, but the probability of both of you being there simultaneously feels astronomical. When you later trace back all the decisions, coincidences, and circumstances that had to align perfectly for the meeting to happen, the complexity of the coordination seems beyond chance. Then there's the element of readiness. Often these encounters happen when you've reached a particular point in your personal development. You've been searching for something, answers, opportunities, connection, direction, and then this person appears carrying exactly what you needed. They show up not too early, when you wouldn't have been ready to receive what they offer, and not too late, after you've given up or chosen another path. The timing of their arrival in your life feels calibrated to your psychological and emotional state. Let's examine the mechanics beneath this pattern. Human social networks are far more interconnected than they appear. The famous concept of 6 degrees of separation suggests that you're connected to any other person on the planet through a chain of just 6 acquaintances. While the exact number varies, the principle holds. Humans exist within overlapping social webs that create far more potential connection points than we consciously realize. When you meet someone who seems randomly placed in your path, there are often hidden connecting threads. You both know someone who knows someone. You both frequent certain types of places. You both belong to demographic or interest groups that naturally overlap in certain locations. The meeting feels cosmically orchestrated, but it might actually be the inevitable result of 2 people moving within intersecting social and geographic patterns. There's also the sheer volume of encounters to consider. In any given week, you cross paths with hundreds or thousands of people. You sit near them on transportation. You stand beside them in stores. You pass them on streets. The vast majority of these encounters are meaningless. You don't remember them. They don't impact your life. They dissolve instantly into forgotten background. But if even one person out of those thousands becomes significant, that single meaningful encounter stands out with disproportionate weight. You don't calculate the probability against all your encounters. You experience it as impossible isolation. Timing plays a fascinating psychological role. When something good happens, you naturally trace back the chain of events that led to it, and you notice all the unlikely elements. If you'd taken your normal route and never met that person, you'd never know you missed them. There would be no story, no sense of loss, no awareness of the path not taken. But because you did meet them and something positive resulted, you retroactively construct a narrative where every delay and detour was meaningful. You transform chaos into pattern, randomness into destiny. The readiness element has psychological explanations too. You're not actually always searching for the same things. Your needs, openness, and attention shift constantly based on your life circumstances. When you're genuinely ready for something, ready for a relationship, ready for career change, ready for new perspective, you become attuned to opportunities and people who can provide that. You notice them. You're receptive to them. You act on possibilities you might have ignored in different mental states. The person was probably always in your environment, but you only truly saw them when you were ready to see them. Yet some destined encounters resist simple explanation. The person who appears at the exact moment of crisis with exactly the right words. The stranger who shows up once delivers information that changes your entire trajectory, and you never see them again. The meeting that required such an elaborate series of deviations from routine on both sides that mapping the probability seems impossible. These encounters feel less like statistics and more like appointments scheduled by forces we don't understand. This is the 6th pattern, the destined encounter synchronicity that makes us believe in fate, soulmates, and the possibility that we're all moving through an intricately choreographed dance where every step, every delay, every seemingly random choice is actually bringing us toward the people we're meant to meet. 7th pattern, the synchronicity storm. You've experienced synchronicities before. One here, one there, scattered throughout your life like rare and precious gems. But then something shifts. Within a single day, 3 impossible coincidences occur. The next day brings 4 more. By the end of the week, you've lost count. You're thinking of someone and they call. Then you see repeating numbers everywhere. Then you overhear the exact answer you needed. Then a meaningful symbol appears. Then you dream something that happens the next day. Then you meet someone impossibly relevant to your current situation. It's not one synchronicity anymore, it's an avalanche. Reality itself seems to have become unstable, responsive, alive with meaning. This is the 7th pattern, the cluster synchronicity, also known as the synchronicity storm. This is not a specific type of coincidence, but rather a meta pattern, a pattern of patterns. It's when multiple different synchronicities from all the previous patterns converge in rapid succession, creating an overwhelming sense that you've slipped into a different mode of reality. Time becomes thick with meaning. The boundary between inner and outer worlds dissolves. Everything seems connected to everything else. What makes this pattern distinct from the others is its intensity and its persistence. A single synchronicity surprises you. 2 synchronicities in one day make you raise an eyebrow. But when 5, 10, 15 synchronicities unfold within a compressed time frame, something fundamental shifts in your experience of reality. You stop dismissing them as coincidence. You stop trying to explain them away. You enter a state where you're watching for the next one, expecting it, and sure enough, it arrives. You've entered the synchronicity storm, and it has its own momentum. People report these clusters happening during specific life periods. Major transitions are the most common trigger. Ending relationships, changing careers, moving to new places, experiencing loss, facing health crises, or undergoing spiritual awakening. During these threshold moments, when your life is fundamentally reorganizing itself, synchronicities seem to multiply exponentially. It's as if the universe becomes more talkative when you're most in need of guidance, confirmation, or simply the feeling that something is paying attention. The experience of being inside a synchronicity storm is distinctive. You become hyper-aware, almost vibrating with attention. Every conversation might contain a message. Every book you randomly open might reveal relevant wisdom. Every person you encounter might be a messenger. You start feeling like you're living inside a symbol-rich reality where nothing is random and everything is significant. Some people find this exhilarating, a heightened state of consciousness where meaning floods through every crack. Others find it overwhelming, even frightening, as if they've lost the solid ground of ordinary cause and effect reality. There's often a feedback loop at work. You notice one synchronicity, which heightens your attention. Heightened attention makes you notice a second synchronicity more readily. Noticing the second one amplifies your awareness further. By the third, fourth, and fifth synchronicities, you're in a state of such acute observation that you're catching meaningful patterns you would normally filter out completely. Each synchronicity primes you to find the next one, creating a self-reinforcing cycle that feels less like you're finding patterns and more like patterns are finding you. The content of cluster synchronicities often develops themes. It's not just random coincidences piling up, there's frequently a coherent message threading through them. Multiple sources pointing toward the same decision. Various symbols all reinforcing a particular interpretation. Different people independently offering similar advice. The thematic consistency across multiple synchronicities feels too coordinated to be accidental, as if something is really trying to communicate with you through every available channel. Let's examine the psychological mechanisms behind synchronicity clusters. First, there's your mental state during transition periods. When you're facing major life changes, your brain enters a mode of heightened pattern seeking. Uncertainty creates a need for guidance, and that need activates your attention systems intensely. You're not just casually moving through your environment, you're actively scanning for signs, signals, meaning, and direction. Your reticular activating system, which normally operates quietly in the background, becomes hyperactive. This heightened state resembles what happens during crisis or trauma. Your brain prioritizes survival and adaptation, which means prioritizing information gathering. Every piece of data might be relevant. Every pattern might offer guidance. You become exquisitely sensitive to your environment in ways you're not during stable periods. This sensitivity isn't mystical, it's a survival mechanism. But the result is that you notice far more of the synchronistic patterns that were always present, but usually filtered out. There's also what psychologists call apophenia, the tendency to perceive meaningful connections between unrelated things. During high stress or transitional periods, apophenia increases. Your brain desperate for predictability in chaotic times, starts connecting dots that might not actually form coherent pictures. Two unrelated events get linked because they happened close together in time. Coincidences get interpreted as causally connected. Random elements get woven into narratives that feel significant. The feedback loop effect is crucial. Once you've identified yourself as someone experiencing synchronicities, you enter a confirmation bias spiral. You're looking for synchronicities, so you find them. Each one confirms your belief that you're in a special state, which makes you look even harder for the next one. Meanwhile, all the non-synchronistic events, the hundreds of moments each day that don't match any pattern, get filtered out as irrelevant. You're only counting the hits, never the misses, which creates a distorted picture of frequency. Memory also plays a significant role in cluster perception. When synchronicities happen close together, you remember them as a connected sequence. But you might forget that 3 days passed between the first and second one, or that you had 40 normal hours between the third and fourth. In memory, they compress into a tight cluster that feels more concentrated than it actually was. The gaps disappear, leaving only the striking moments, which makes the cluster seem denser and more impossible than it truly was. Yet there's something experientially real about synchronicity storms that resists complete reduction to psychology. People who go through them report genuine transformation. Decisions become clear, paths forward emerge, connections deepen. Whether the synchronicities are objectively meaningful or your heightened state is making you receptive to information that was always available doesn't change the functional outcome. You receive guidance. You make choices. You move through transitions with a sense of being supported rather than alone. Perhaps the most interesting aspect of synchronicity clusters is what happens after them. Eventually, the storm passes. The frequency of coincidences returns to normal. Reality becomes ordinary again, and you're left integrating the experience, trying to understand what happened. Were you briefly in contact with deeper levels of reality? Did you tap into normally hidden dimensions of consciousness? Or did you simply enter a temporary state of heightened awareness that revealed patterns your normal consciousness filters out? This is the seventh and final pattern. The synchronicity storm that bundles all the other patterns into an overwhelming cascade of meaning, connection, and impossible timing, leaving you forever changed in your understanding of what reality might actually be, what consciousness might actually do, and whether the universe might actually be far more responsive and alive than our everyday assumptions allow.